This is Goals with Soul, the podcast for visionary coaches and entrepreneurs, building your business with inspired action. In alignment with your mission and authentic message, so you can create impact for your soul clients and feel lit up every day. I'm your host, Jo Ingram, married mum of 3 daughters from London and a former ad agency director turned business coach and strategist. In Goals with Soul, we blend revenue generation with energetics, marketing strategies with pranic healing, and ambitious business goals with our soul's desires. If you're looking to build your business with less efforting and more ease, this is the podcast for you. Let's dive in. Welcome to Goals with Soul. I have an incredible interview coming right up. But before that, are you an established intuitive coach or healer who's outgrown your current clients and perhaps your offers too? Have you been hiding your unique brilliance while working with clients who drain your energy instead of lighting you up? If so, I've got something special to share today. I'm opening a limited number of spots in my signature 1-to-1 4-week intensive, which is designed specifically for practitioners who are ready to consistently sell 5K or more offers to premium high frequency clients who deeply value their gifts. My work always begins with the transformative 4-week Messaging Magic Intensive, where we'll identify your individual brand positioning that articulates your innate brilliance. We'll define your elevated client avatar who will appreciate your true value and translate your unique magic into words that make your soul clients just get it. Plus, we'll realign the energetics of your messaging to attract the premium clients you most want to work with. You're a perfect fit if you already have a transformative offer with proven results and are ready to implement with self-trust and initiative. I've opened 2 spots right now to start in February or March. And if you're curious if we're aligned to work together, simply send me a DM over on Instagram at iamjo.ingram or send me an email, jo@iamjoingram.com, sharing where you are now and what you'd like to change. Let's bring your unique brilliance into the world in a way that attracts the premium clients you're meant to work with. Now, let's dive into today's episode. I'm excited to introduce you to Rashelle Isip, who's also known as the Order Expert. She's a New York City-based productivity consultant, time management coach, organization expert, speaker and author who helps successful entrepreneurs like us, business owners and professionals, effectively manage their time and energy so they can, of course, reduce stress, work less, and make more money in their businesses. She's also authored 4 books, including The Order Expert's Guide to Time Management and How to Be More Organized Right Now. As I will share with you as we open the interview, productivity has a place close to my heart and indeed was something that I used to teach and help people with when I first launched my business. And even now, though I've moved into a very different expertise, productivity always interests me. I like to think about what it means for us each as individuals. I know it doesn't mean working yourself to the bone and getting burned out. And yet being productive is something intrinsically linked with being successful because particularly as a solopreneur, there is so much to do. So Rashelle and I are going to dive into these telltale warning signs of what productivity looks like for the sake of being productive and where women business owners fall short when it comes to being productive in their business. And importantly, how we can be more productive in our daily routines while simultaneously reducing feelings of overwhelm. Make sure you listen to the end as Rashelle is going to share a very helpful, inspired action invitation. Let's dive in. Rashelle, welcome to Goals with Soul.
Thanks for having me, Joanna. It's wonderful to be here.
Now, today we're going to dive into the idea of productivity. And, for me, this takes me way, way back. For those people tuning in who might not have followed Goals with Soul from the beginning, when I first launched it, it was December 2020, and Goals with Soul was actually called Action Takers Tribe, because at the time I was really focused on productivity and accountability, CEO strategies, and was coaching much more in that area before I completely shifted gears. And yet I've been called back to some of these topics around productivity, right? As much as I love being, in the energetic space and it's about feminine flow and, that's a part of me. I think sometimes we have to just take a stock about what it means or what it could mean if we're more productive, we manage our time better. And Rashelle, you and I met in a networking event, and I remember being really mesmerized by what you were saying and thinking, sometimes it's good to blend these areas and get much more aligned with it. So, like, tell us kind of how you got into productivity and the area that you specialize in. Was that something because you were terribly unorganized, or have you always been someone that's been really organized?
Actually, I have been someone who has always been organized. Ever since I was little, I enjoyed organizing anything I could get my hands on. I organized my toys, my books, canned goods in my mother's pantry. I even organized my Halloween candy, so I was in it. And it's just always been something that has been enjoyable to me. And as I grew older, I realized, oh, not everyone does this. And part of me realized, you know, I could help others with this thing that brings me so much joy and so much pleasure. What would that look like? So I didn't quite straight go into what I'm doing now. I did start off my career in corporate public relations. But after being there for a few years, I decided, you know what? I want to go off and do my own thing. And I really want to put my innate skills and talents to use and to really help people.
Yeah, and I love that because, one of the things that we'd say in our industry, and certainly very close to my heart, is that when we attune to our innate talents and our gifts, things feel effortless. And, when we talk about flow, when we're doing something that comes easy to us and yet is so valuable to others, it's an incredible, like, freeing thing because we can just generate business, generate advice, wisdom, work, all the things that business needs without the over efforting and the kind of hassle that business often kind of suggests it might be. But I know something else that kind of can cause that disconnect between the ease and the flow, which is like being completely out of organization and being in chaos. And I'm like, what do you see with the sorts of people that you help? Tell us a little bit about what's going on for them and why it's kind of so detrimental to building a business.
Right. So when people come to me, they're usually very stressed out. They're feeling overwhelmed. They have a lot on their plate. They're very busy. Their business is doing really well. And they just feel, I would say, and describe it as being stuck. All the things are going on, but they feel that they're at a standstill and they're just not sure what step to take. Should I take this step and go into that direction? Should I do that task? Should I talk to this person, that person? What should I do? So, that feeling of overwhelm can be really, really debilitating because it can stop us from doing basically anything, in our business and our lives. And the problem with that is when it becomes so chronic, there's just nothing going on. That person is really just at a standstill. And that translates to the business being at a standstill because the person hasn't consciously made the decision to identify what's going on, find a solution to that problem, and move forward. So that's really where I see things, go wrong. It's that sense of overwhelm, that sense of conflict, that sense of what do I do now? And that's really, really common.
Yes. I mean, I think my nature is probably a little bit more like yours than others. It's like, when you talk about organizing the canned goods, I'm like, yeah. Although we'll call them tins here in the UK. But I'll be like, yeah, I would totally get into that. And I really, you can see from the books behind me, everything's like in color order. And it's just like that joy of the organizing and being productive and organized. But that said, I'm not beyond getting to a place where I don't know what to prioritize. And you just go, whoo, that's a lot. I've got a lot going on. And one thing that, really strikes me from my corporate days, from my early days of my business as sort of CEO strategist, is this idea that we can really bottleneck our businesses, particularly as solopreneurs or even running a small team where everything kind of comes through us. It's that if we can't kind of see the wood for the trees, we can't prioritize, we can't manage our time really well. It's like everything's bottlenecked with us. Nothing's moving. The things that should be moving, that will produce revenue, the things that will take the business forward, can suddenly come to quite a dramatic standstill. Is there something you see, and like, what are the kind of obvious solutions that when you see this, you're like, right, this is the very first thing you're going to have to do right now?
Yeah. One of the first things that I get people to do, it might sound actually counterintuitive, but it's to actually stop or slow down, because at this point in time, people have just been going and going and going, and they've been spinning their wheels or thinking about doing things. And more times than not, it's really helpful just to take a step back so you can have that contrast to where you've been. And in that space and in that time, you're allowing things to settle out. You're allowing your thoughts, that sense of pressure or need to get things done, and just having basically that vacation, from being on as a business owner can really help. And I'm not necessarily saying, everybody has to take a vacation, right away, but it really is that mindfulness in the moment, as someone is going through their daily routine. Okay, I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed. I don't know what to do. Let me take 5 minutes as a timeout. Let me just stop. Let me just be. Let me do some meditating, maybe some prayer, anything that can just help you come back to a focused and present state, so you can actually just breathe, I think is very helpful for people.
Yeah, like a vacation snack, right?
Yes, yes, yes.
That is so, so true. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because, when you're busy doing, it's like none of the space is there to, really think what you want and, what you feel happy doing and the direction that you really want to be going in. And like, I can really empathize with that, like the power
Yeah.
of just taking a pause, as I'm going to call it from now on, a vacation snack. Like, I'll be like, between these two calls, I'm going to take a vacation snack. So, which for me is like lying on my bed and watching Netflix, but it could be anything, right?
I like that. I like that. I also like to, help people when it comes to these things, like productivity and time management and organization, is to use analogies, because I think so much of the time we can get caught up in society and the idea of tools and techniques and things like that, but we don't necessarily see the bigger picture of things. So I like to use analogies to help people, bring this home in their daily routine. So as I was just describing, when someone's working on a project or in their business, you can think of it like going on a long journey, right? Like you want to go visit this distant land and you're traveling and you come to a crossroads. You have three different paths you can take. And you could walk down path A, you could walk down path B, and you could walk down path C, and it would still get you to your destination. But what people tend to do is just stay at that crossroads and kind of just spin around going, which one should I take? A, B, C, A, B, C. I don't know which way to go. A, B, C. And so, you know, having that analogy in one's mind can be helpful, because that really is where people tend to get caught up. They're at a crossroads, they need to make a decision, but they just are stuck because they haven't made a decision. But any decision that they make will inevitably help them move one step closer to their goal, one step closer, to that destination. So, if you're having trouble visualizing, where you are when it comes to your business and work, sometimes taking that step back and using an analogy can be really helpful. It really just, uh, brings it home. Like, oh, I'm concerned about this project and, this client and dealing with this, request. What should I do? What should I do? It's all going to get me to the same place, but I need to make a decision right now about which one I'm going to address first. And then after
Yeah.
I've done that, I can go to the next, and then I can go to the next. So, a big part of this, I think, when it comes to business owners, is trust. And trust means in oneself and in one's judgment. We decided to go into business for ourselves because we wanted to help people in some way, right? Provide a product or a service. And we can really get stuck and stagnant in that energy when we just don't trust ourselves, with our judgment in order to take action. So I think a big part of the lesson here is listen, to that and trust yourself, be willing to say, you know what, I'm going to make a decision and I'm going to go with it. And I can deal with whatever happens from that decision, but I'm going to have to make a decision right now and move forward. And I think that's also something that I regularly tell people, you're not making one decision and that's that in your business. You're always going to be making decisions. You're always going to have to be comparing and evaluating. So the sooner we can understand and just get comfortable with that, the better off we're going to be. Because,
Yeah.
business and life is just a series of decisions again and again and again.
I really like the insight on that. I've always been a big fan of making decisions. Not that I love making decisions, I just believe that you have to just make a decision. And actually, I saw something, might have been on the Instagram feed the other day, and I'd love your opinion on it. It's quite an experienced coach, and she had an opinion which I thought was really fascinating. She said, it's not about making the right decision, it's about making the decision right. So,
Hmm.
and she says that you can't possibly know what the outcome's going to be if you choose A or you choose B. You can't know what's going to happen. So in the end, you just have to make a decision, and then whatever decision you make it right. Go all in. Really commit to it. Really make it the right decision, which I thought was a really interesting way of looking at it. But interestingly, she got lots of shade thrown on the feed. Like a lot of people like, this is nonsense. What are you talking about? Of course, you got to really think about it and make the right decision. And like, how from your specialism, how do you view her point of view?
No, I think that's a reasonable approach. I mean, I think people, may not view it in that sense because they may not be looking at it in terms of the totality of how that one decision can really just stagnate one's energy. Because when we don't make a decision about something, it just wears us down. It takes away our energy, it takes away our focus, it takes away our time. And so by making a decision and moving forward, then you've just already freed up all of that energy that you were putting into being stuck basically in one place. So, um, I really do think that when you make a decision, you really do open up that channel for the next step. And, you know, you could just think about like any time in your life where you've been made, not made, but you've come to a point where you need to make a decision about something, right? Is it, do I go with door number one or do I go with door number two? And that moment, before you come to the decision can be really uncomfortable. But then once you decide, things just kind of open up like that angst, that, uncomfortableness kind of just shifts and you're like, okay, that was a bit uncomfortable, but I've made it my decision. I'm going to go with this one. And your whole persona, and your demeanor changes because you've decided I don't want to say necessarily committed, but you've made this decision, for your next steps. And then you can take all of that energy and focus and put it towards, applying everything that you need to get done, for that one decision.
It's a
So
funny
I
thing
think,
about decisions, because I was just thinking, I did some research last summer. I was speaking to a large group of corporate women working in advertising and media about personal branding. But as part of my research, I was looking at the difference between men and women leaders. And this piece came up, and sadly, I can't quote who what the source was, but it was around this idea that men typically make decisions far quicker than women, particularly in leadership at CEO levels of companies, in politics, and so on. And they get seen as more powerful, as having more attributes as a leader because they make quick decisions. However, the research also pointed out that the decisions they made weren't any better. Like, they weren't making great decisions, and often they were making bad decisions because, like all humans, they didn't have all of the information. They have to make decisions based on the information of what they've got. But people are so much more forgiving of our country's leaders, of our industry's leaders, who make a quick decision, stand by it, and then it didn't work out. People are like, well, they had to do something. They had to work with the information that they had, and they had to lead with a strong, decisive, direction. And I think it's fascinating, and relating that back to how that is within our industry and your clients. It's like the lack of power that we're giving ourselves when we sit in that procrastination and we sit not making decisions. And Rachelle, you mentioned it's like that drain on the energy, and like making that decision suddenly creates that energetic match to the leader, even if we don't know if it's the right decision at the time.
Yeah, yeah. And I think also with this whole thing about making decisions is that the more that you do it, the easier it becomes. Like, I'm not saying that everybody will, always make the right decision or the best decision in any circumstance. It's just that the muscle is flexed more. And once you start exercising that muscle and you start doing things and you start noticing the results of your decisions, then you've got just a bit more information about, oh, did I have enough information then? Was I doing, the best that I could under those circumstances? Did new things pop into my experience that I really couldn't have foreseen? So it's kind of like the next level of decision. Not only are you solving the problem that needs to be solved, but you're thinking about your decision-making skills in a new way. I mean, if you just start thinking about um, all the decisions that you make on a daily basis, like just even being human, in the morning about, okay, what do I have for breakfast? What do I wear? What I'm going to have for lunch? Am I going to exercise today? It's a lot of decisions. And just over the past weeks and months, I'm sure you've come to your own conclusions about things, such as, eating a big breakfast or a big meal and then going out for, a run, that might not be good for me, and you get feedback from your decisions. So, it is kind of like the best way to do it is just to go through it. So, you'll learn so much just from the action of it. And yeah, I mean, I can really relate to, um, that sense of make the decision, see what happens, twinker, adjust, and then keep making more decisions. And, I think the more that we can just practice that habit, the better off we'll be. The more confidence, the more faith, the more trust we'll have in ourselves, because I think in general, people make good decisions, right? For just anything that's happening on in their business or lives. I mean, we usually don't say, oh, I'm going to go do this extreme or that extreme. It's usually somewhere that falls within our range of what we want to get done. So I think if we can just, lighten up and just realize, this too this too shall pass. And this decision really isn't, the make or break of the decade, let alone the century. Like it's going to be okay.
I totally feel that energy. And it's like one of the things that I hear a lot is, I do want to make a decision, but I haven't got really time to think it through, and I want to talk it through with people. I want to think it through. I want to map it out on my bit of paper. But life's so busy and hectic, and there's so little time to really do anything. And, I always see as productivity experts, it's always productivity and time management. It's always, the two go so hand in hand. And I'd love to hear, what's the deal with time management? Why is time such a difficult thing? I think so many people have said it, but I'll quote the latest one I heard, which was Tony Robbins, who said, we all have the same 24 hours a day, but some people use it to create, a massive success, and others just, it seems that it's wasted. And it's like, from your work with, so many entrepreneurs, what is the difference between people that are seemingly using their time well, and those that are really not understanding how time can be a resource for them uh, rather than a sort of pain in the ass, really?
Yeah, I think it's an understanding and awareness is that there's two different aspects to time. There's times when things are busy, when we're working, when we're getting things done. And then there's times when things are not busy, right? When things are quiet, it might be a vacation time, a rest break, a hiatus. We're just taking a step back. And I think that we just don't understand and appreciate that so much in our society in general. Um, Look, time is really basically like a human construct, right? We've devised the days, the months, the weeks, the years, so that we can meet at a specific place and time, and be there together, for example, for a meeting. But there's also, a seasonality and, I like to call it kind of like a universal construct of time, and that things do happen in their own time, right? I mean, nature goes through the seasons throughout the year. It doesn't just happen in one day. There's a gradual buildup. And just like the seasons, there's a time to plant crops, there's a time to harvest crops. There's times when, seeds take, and there's times when seeds don't take. So, I think just getting more clear and understanding about how time really exists, in our world is, really key, first and foremost. And then second, to understand that we really do experience time differently. I mean, just think about a task that you've done in your business within the past week that you absolutely do not like to do, right? How different is that task from something that brings you absolute joy in your business that you could do for hours on end? And wouldn't care if you were hungry or tired. You just love doing it so, so much. So I mean, that's still time, right? But you're experiencing it in different ways. So part of the work that I do is to get people to recognize that time can be existing in our world in these two ways, right? The rigid and kind of the more soft. And then there's also our perception of how we're using time. Are we using it rigidly? Are we using it soft? And just how are we using and interacting with the two? It's a big difference, right? We're not just working, 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 and then we're not just vacationing, vacationing, vacationing all the time either. So there has to be a balance. And that's really what I think people need to learn and appreciate when it comes to time management.
Yeah, I really understand that. I know a couple of people in my network that never take a break. Like there's never a kind of winter where they can just relax. I mean, don't get me wrong, it could be in the middle of the summer and they could take time off, but there's just that season of their business doesn't seem to exist, which, I found astonishing for me, being able to be off with my kids all of the school holidays as much as possible has been really important to me. But I do know that at the very beginning of my business, I kind of couldn't manage my time well enough to do that. And I've had to be quite intentional to allow, my commitments to be delivered on either side of those holidays, right? But what about, the working week and the working day? Like, how big a deal is it to be organized in, how you start each day or start each week? And what kind of chaos do people, in your experience, get into when they've got sort of no clue how to do this and a million things to do?
Right. Well, before I get there, I actually wanted to bring up a point as you were just speaking just now. You made me think of something that I talk with people a lot when it comes to time as well. It's that sense of either there's a lack of time, or there's an abundance of time. And this can really be a stumbling block for people, when it comes to, well, how do I structure my calendar? Do I have a lot of time? Do I have a little time? So, that perception can really influence how we're going to structure our day. If you feel like you don't have enough time in the day or in the week, you're always going to be coming from a sense of lack, a place of lack, and you can never get it done, never get it done. Um, and then if you're doing it from the other extreme, oh, I have plenty of time. I have more than enough time. That can also cause problems in the sense of, well, you might not have planned well enough and you might have missed a deadline for something, or you waited or procrastinated too long. So, those are the two ends of the spectrum. But when it comes to planning, the day to day, I always like to say to people, you need to have some sort of structure in place because you want to protect not only the time in your business, but your own personal time. So, you need to have those boundaries set. What are your working hours? What are your business hours? What's your personal life like in terms of your schedule? That has to be set. And then there also has to be some sort of routine where you're doing things, but the way in which you do those tasks or projects or assignments, they don't necessarily have to be rigid. So it really is, a marrying of the two. You need to have some sort of structure in place, but at the same time, you don't have to be so rigid where you're just being regimental and you're not paying attention to, the little things that are going on, or you're not enjoying the time that's passing. You're not enjoying those breaks between one meeting to the next or one client appointment to the next. So it really is about finding that balance.
And it's like, how do people find a balance? I know it's like people sort of going, yeah, 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 you're so right. You're so right. But, I love how you're looking at this from, a really sort of helicopter view, because a lot of time management comes from a kind of, here's a bullet journal, get on with it. Or, here's a simple technique, do it like this. Or, Pomodoro, there's loads of techniques to use, right?
Right, right. And that's something that um I see so much in the work that I do because people will come to me many times and say, Rashelle, what's the best tool? Is it this one? Is it that one? I saw somebody use this. My best friend used that. My coworker did this. What should I do? What should I do? What should I do? And we tend to put so much value on the tool. I mean, yes, the tool, the technique, the tip can help us, but if we haven't accurately defined the problem or what it is that we're trying to solve or how we like to work, that tool, that tip, that approach won't be helpful if you're not willing to work with it. So, I think it really is crucial for people to take a step back and think about, okay, what's the problem? What's the issue going on right now? And then also to explore, like when I work with my clients, how do I naturally like to work? Am I a visual person? Do I find that I learn things better, audio wise? Do I like writing? Do I need to spend time with people to be energized? Do I not? Being really honest about this can be really helpful when it comes to finding the right tool for you. I mean, I always say to people, just try a tool, and then if it doesn't work out, okay, it doesn't work out. I mean, we don't have to put such high value, on a tool just because it's a tool, you know? It can help us get our work done, but we don't have to, say it's the be all end all, So, I like to say to people, there really isn't a silver bullet like when it comes to the tool, but if you really want some good insight and you really want to make some good progress into how you work, the best thing you can do is to practice getting to know yourself and your preferences and your skills and your talents because that will truly help you be more productive in the long term than not.
I really like the way you describe that because, it's making me think of an element of my own work, but I've never put it in those terms. Like when I help my clients with marketing strategy, although I come from, 20 years experience with advertising agencies and marketing, I think it's really important to get to the energy of, in my case, marketing. It's like, what do you actually enjoy? Because it's like, to your point, if you enjoy doing it and it feels easy and fun, then you're going to do a lot in the time is going to pass, boom, an hour, and you might set up a whole week's worth of content. Whereas if you're trying to fit a square peg in a round hole, i.e., something you really hate doing with something you think that needs to be done, like dancing on reels or opening a TikTok or doing some variety of different advertising or marketing modes that you just don't want to do, every single moment of you trying to do that is going to be agonizing. I don't like how I look on film. I didn't like the filter. I couldn't get the words to line up. It's just going to be just agony to be in that, and it's going to suck up your time. You're going to hate doing it, and of course you're going to procrastinate and then stop doing it after a time. And I guess the way you're describing everything, Rachelle, it's like, so like that's the reality across everything. If it's something that is like, has that obligation, resentment feeling, then the time isn't going to be on your side. Is that how it like relates to that?
Right, right. Because the more you dislike, despise, resent doing something, it's just going to take longer. You may not work on it it may not ever get finished. You're going to have such a different relationship to that thing. I mean, it'll just take on a whole different, aspect, to your work. And then also, that can really seep into your other work too, and just, your life. Like we don't want things, transferring from one part to another if we can help it. Um, so that's why, I say to people, it's like, look, you can work however you want to work. There's no like productivity police out there saying you have to use this tool or you have to use it in this manner. Um, and, just going back to what we were talking about making decisions, like this is also where you have to come and trust yourself. Like, okay, maybe I prefer to I don't know, file my files in this way. It's okay. It works for me. I can find what I need, and to not make that wrong. I think there's that whole aspect of, oh, if I'm not doing it this way, if I'm not doing it to perfection, or I'm not doing it the way that so-and-so is doing it, then I'm doing it wrong. That's not necessarily the case. We really have to take that step back, um, you know, understand where we are, where we're coming from, what's the solution that we need to solve, and then, find that solution that works for us. Um, it really is, I think, that personal, when it
Mm.
comes to time management.
And there's a lot of enthusiasm behind digitizing organization now. You know, tools like
Yeah.
Trello and Asana, and this idea that everything needs to be somehow digitized. From using, I don't know what they're called. They're very desirable, but like these pads that you write on, but it digitizes your notes immediately.
Hmm.
And um, this idea that everything should be in this digital space. And yet, I'm not sure that for me, I know it's not the right solution. And don't get me wrong, I'm super tech, and a lot of most of my business is run online in some way. But there's some critical things that I just don't think I can ever put online. Like, I love the idea of a CRM system. And I have my own version of a digital list that has information in it. But every call I ever do goes in my beautifully bound notebook. And I've got one for discovery calls, I've got one for clients only, I've got one for networking, and I make my notes in there. And I don't go into my digital system and retype them. But I know the date of that meeting, and I know if I ever need to look back on it, it'll be in this book and it'll be listed according to date, chronologically. It's not difficult to find the notes. So I get kind of like confused why there's such a call for a standardization of how we do. And I was wondering, like, do you think that as we're moving through that more and more will become digitized, and I'm a bit of a dinosaur in this respect, or do you think it doesn't really matter and you should just get on with what works for you?
I mean, I really think that it's really not going to be as cut and dry as we think because we're still using paper now. Remember when the computer came along and everyone was saying, "Oh, we won't need paper, we won't have paper," and yet paper use, seemed to just multiply because it was just all over the place, right? It's easy to print, it's easy to do this and that. Um, I think the tools will change, but I still think that there is going to be that analog version that we humans will use because there is something about that tactileness, about that holding that pen or pencil and writing in the notebook or sitting down and focusing. They've done studies that have shown that people remember more when they actually write things down, whether or not you actually go back and look at your notes. It's that process, it's that focus. It's a much different experience than typing or swiping or putting things, in a digital world. And that's not to say that, digital tools aren't good. And that's not to say that paper tools are better, but it's just understanding that for some things, yeah, you might need to use this type of tool. For that, you might need to use another. And yeah, just getting comfortable with how you like to work. I mean, I also, use a lot of tech things or, online things, but I also do enjoy writing and having notebooks and planners and things like that. Like for me, I know that it helps me remember things better. And just visually, like when it comes to planning, I do tend to remember things better when I write things down. So, I think if people can just allow themselves to experiment and just to honor like that preference, it's almost as silly as saying something like, well, I'm going to go to the ice cream store and there's a choice between vanilla and chocolate, but I really don't like chocolate, but I'm going to have it anyway because it's on sale. It's like, well, if you like vanilla, go for the vanilla. It just because it exists doesn't mean you have to have it. So, I think if we can just get more comfortable with the idea that our preferences are important and that they actually will help us when it comes to getting our work done, maybe we should explore that. Maybe we should really think about, huh, how do I go about my work? It's not the same for everyone, and that can be in any profession, in any type of business. How you think really is unique to you. Um, and we all have things that need to get done, but how can you really use your strengths and your tendencies and your just personal habits and preferences to your advantage? That's something that when harnessed, I mean, that just makes the work so much easier, right? Than having to struggle from doing it the other way, that, the perceived better way. So, yeah, I really encourage people to, stop and think like, is this really helping me in the way that I think is helping me, or is it just my thought that it's going to help me?
Yeah. And, I'm at the point of asking about, inspired action because to value anyone's listening's time, it's like, let's not take up more time than is necessary. And in fact, why don't you go and have a vacation snack when you finish listening to this show, right? But before you do, like, Rashelle, is there anything that people could do first after having listened to this and feeling like, you know what, Rachel has just hit on something, a pain point in my business right now. I do feel overwhelmed and it's a bit chaotic, and I'm definitely, blocking the progress of what needs to flow through my business. What could be the first thing that they could do to start to turn that around?
Right. So once you've identified that sticky point, that pain point, I want you to think about approaching it through an act of enjoyment, as opposed to pushing through it and thinking, I have to do it this way. I have to do it the way that other people have said. I have to, have to, have to. Just ease up off of it for a moment and think about how you would approach it if you were doing it the way that you wanted to do it. Does that mean taking a break? Does that mean using a different format? Does that mean talking to someone? Does that mean putting it aside for a couple of days and then coming back to it? Give yourself that space and that grace to really view it as, like a mini experiment. Like, well, how am I going to solve this problem? I don't have to solve it necessarily in the way that people say it should be solved. Um, sometimes I think that distance and that different approach can really be helpful when it comes to solving challenges and situations, in our businesses.
Thank you so much. I'm going to get onto that as soon as I get on this call. And if anybody wants to learn more about your work or have a chat with you online, where's the best place to find you?
Sure, they can find me at my website, theorderexpert.com, and folks can sign up for a free 30-minute strategy session with me one-on-one. And they can also find me on LinkedIn. I'm usually there almost every day posting things, so you can also find me there as well.
Wonderful. We'll put all those links in the show notes if you want to pop over there and connect with Rachelle. And just to say, Rachelle, thank you so much for joining me and sharing your wisdom today.
Oh, thank you so much, Joanna. I had a really nice time here. Thank you.